My name is Wanda Schaffner Allen,
Okay, and what is your date of birth?
May 17th, 1932,
And where were you born?
Prairie Grove, Arkansas.
Where in Prairie Grove?
A block off of Main Street.
Okay, and I just want to be sure you know that interview will be used for the Prairie Grove Oral History Project, and to confirm that we have your permission to use the interview.
Yes.
Thank you, Wanda. So tell me about your parents.
My father's name was Martin Mahan Schaffner. My mother's name was Marion Beatty Schaffner.
Okay, and tell me about your siblings.
I have one brother. He's 6 years younger than I am. He lives in Phoenix, Arizona now.
And his name?
James Martin Schaffner.
Okay. And tell me about your families and their business.
Well, my father was a farmer. He was born and raised in Prairie Grove. My mother was born and raised in Lincoln, Arkansas. And he raised cattle, and then in later years had a dairy barn.
Where did y'all live?
2.5 miles, I guess, west of Prairie Grove on, I forgot, Ditmars Road.
Okay. Tell me what it was like growing up as a child living out there.
Well, it was a lot of fun. My cousin, who's the same age I am, lived in Prairie Grove, Mary Elizabeth Fiddler. And we did a lot of playing out there, getting in trouble mostly, I think. And really, I don't remember too much more about it. We didn't have to do much work, that's for sure. I think we picked strawberries one time and got a nickel a quart, and that was the end of our strawberry picking.
Where'd y'all pick the strawberries?
Well, I'm not sure. Probably over at the Delap's farm, which was on Stonewall Road. But,
what would y'all do for fun?
oh, we swiped eggs at my mother's hen house and made mud pies, which we got into a lot of trouble over, and went swimming, horseback riding, things like that.
When you were a young child growing up, what would the adults do for fun back in those days?
Played cards, played pitch mostly.
Where would they play?
At their different homes, neighbors and relatives, and all at homes.
What would the kids do at this time?
Well, I don't really remember. I guess we didn't do much because there was no television. I assume we played games too, but usually not card games.
When you were growing up, when do you remember, did you always have electricity, or did you remember getting electricity? Tell me about electricity.
No, we didn't have electricity for quite some time. I can't remember the year, but I guess I must have been probably 8 or 9, and it was just wonderful that we didn't have to use a lamp to study by. There was just one line with a light bulb hanging in each room, and we may have had a radio, but I'm not sure. I'm sure we did in later years, but we didn't have a refrigerator or anything like that.
When did y'all get a refrigerator and a washing machine?
Well, it was of course, after electricity. My mother had a wash machine, and I think before that, out on the back porch, that she just poured water in, heated the water on the stove. And but after we got the wash machine and refrigerator, And I see, I've forgotten what else. It was years before we had a television.
Do you remember what year you got one in, or about what year
What year what?
you got a television?
Well, we didn't. I moved to California in 1953 and sent money back to my folks to buy a TV. So that's the first time they had a television.
What were you doing in California?
I went to worked at Douglas Aircraft for 10 years. And then my husband and I moved back here. I got married out there. And my husband and I moved back to Prairie Grove in 1966.
When did you move to California? What year would that have been?
In 1953.
53?
Mm-hmm. And I worked at Douglas Aircraft most of the time.
What did you do at Douglas Aircraft?
I worked in accounts payable department until they closed. The first one was in El Segundo, California, and then they moved to Long Beach, and that's when they closed. And then I lived in Hermosa Beach, California, and we moved out to the valley, and I worked in a couple of aircraft places out there before we moved back to Prairie Grove.
Tell me about your move back to Prairie Grove. What year was that, and what was the town like then?
We moved back here in 1966, and we moved in with my mother and grandmother. My father had passed away by then out on the farm, and my husband went to work in Fayetteville. And
where did he
Prairie
work?
Grove, where did he work? He worked for a Washington County judge. And I guess we bought a house in Prairie Grove after that, and that's where I've lived in the same house ever since. Lots of things had changed in Prairie Grove. My friends mostly had moved away, but it was still, Prairie Grove.
Tell me about the people in Prairie Grove. What are they like?
Well, very good, very nice. My grandfather lived back when I was small down on Mock Street, and my aunt, she worked as a lab technician at the Elizabeth Hospital in Prairie Grove. And then my other aunt, her husband, Roy Fiddler, owned all the buildings, the Fiddler buildings down in Prairie Grove. She had a little dress shop there. So I had a lot of family here. We went to the Methodist Church, and that's about all I...
Where did you go to school?
I went from the first grade till the 12th grade in Prairie Grove School.
Well, tell me about the school, what it was like, what the buildings were like, and what the kids were like.
Well, the grade school was over here, I can't remember the name of the street, Pittman, I believe. And across the street was the high school. So we went till the 6th grade in grade school and then moved it over to the high school.
What did the high school look like?
It was a 3-story brick building with the stairs going all the way up. I don't think we used the 3rd story, but it was, I think it was used for storage. And it was old. The heating was bad because when the weather was bad, we didn't get to go to school. But
what kind of heating did it have?
I guess a radiator. I can't remember. It was down in the basement, I know. And but it was fine. We had good teachers and good times.
Who were some of the teachers you remember?
Well, Miss Holmes, and I think she was our music. I know she was our study hall teacher, maybe English teacher. Ms. Long, can't remember, Mr. Cornwell was our superintendent at one time. And then there was a Mr. Sloan that was also a superintendent. So I went through a lot of superintendents through the years.
What did you do to help out when you were a young kid? What would you do around the house to help out?
Well, I hate to say it, but really I didn't do too much because my grandmother lived with us as I got up older and should have been doing housework. She did what I should have done, so I was kind of lazy, I guess.
Tell me some of the stores and businesses you remember shopping in Prairie Grove back in the
We had
olden days.
two drugstores, Carmen and the Sterling, and Rutherford's grocery store, and I worked there when I was in high school. We had a program called Diversified Occupation, I think, where we worked in the afternoon at one of the stores downtown. I think it was my junior, senior year, maybe both years, that I worked down there. There were several cafes. Carney's Cafe had been there ever since I remember. Otasco, which my uncle Roy Fiddler owned. And then in later years, Howard Fiddler bought it. Crescent Department Store, Harlan's Variety Store, Vincent's Cafe, the theater back when we were teenagers and growing up, and Southern Mercantile. I'm sure of a lot more, but I'm not sure which ones.
Tell me about going to church. Where did your family go to church?
We went to the Prairie Grove United Methodist Church down on Neal Street. It was an old church. In fact, we built a new one, and I can't remember the year, 5, 6, 7, it's been a while, out on sort of in the country, on 170, I think. And it was, we had an MYF for the teenagers, and we went to that every Sunday night, played games and had a devotional and did different things.
What about the Battlefield Park? Did you ever go out to the Battlefield Park very often?
Well, I really don't think so. I remember the Battlefield Park, yes. There was only one building there at the time, as we were kids growing up. I think we probably, had picnics and things. And then, of course, in later years, it was the Clothesline Fair after we moved back here. We went to it, of course, every year.
When y'all moved back here, what were some of the things you guys would do for social time or entertainment for the other friends and neighbors?
Oh, go dancing, played cards, went to ball games, football and basketball.
Razorbacks,
Razorback games, and then Prairie Grove when I moved. We lived, and I still do, right up by the Prairie Grove football field. And our sons, of course, went to school in Prairie Grove, graduated from Prairie Grove High School.
Tell me about your children.
I have 2 boys. David Allen is 51, and Michael Allen is 48.
And what do they do?
Well, Michael works for Walmart in Bentonville, and my older son lives in Texas. He lives down between Dallas and Fort Worth. He works for I've even forgotten what he does. a storage company.
Oh.
And I have 5 grandsons.
What about, where do they go to school?
Okay, Michael's 3 boys go to 3 different schools in Springdale. And David's 2 sons live in Texas. They go to, let's see, I forgot the name of the school, but they go to school down in Texas.
What, no, your sons, where do they go to school in Prairie Grove, or do they go?
My 2 boys?
Yes.
Yes, they both graduated from Prairie Grove. Mm-hmm.
What was it like for them going to Prairie Grove when they were kids?
Well, they seemed to enjoy it. My oldest son, David, was in sports, so he played basketball, football, track. My youngest son was in the band, and they just grew up like the rest of them around the neighborhood.
If I had to ask you to tell me like one story that would like really tell you something about Prairie Grove, or like your favorite story about Prairie Grove, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. You mean in later years or?
Anytime.
Anytime?
If you just met someone and they say, tell me a great story about Prairie Grove, what would you tell them?
I can't even think of any. I really don't know.
Well, is there any other stories you want to tell that I haven't think to ask about?
Well, my mother worked at the telephone office for several. Well, she and my grandmother had the telephone office before I was born, and then after we moved to the farm, I think my grandmother went to Lincoln to run the telephone office there.
Tell me about that. Tell me more about that. When did she start working there, and what did she do?
She was a switchboard operator, and
What was her name?
my mother or my grandmother?
Your grandmother. You said she worked there too?
Myrtle Beatty.
And what did she do?
And she was she had the switchboard in her home, or in a home. The one in Lincoln was in just a small house, and she and her half-sister ran it for many years. My mother worked at the Prairie Grove telephone office. And after, well, I guess she went back to work in 1948 and worked there, I think, until they got the new telephone office and the digital, and not the old switchboard.
What was it like running that old switchboard? Did you ever go in and watch her do it?
I'd love to do it. But Mother wouldn't let me, but when Grandmother had the telephone office in Lincoln, she used to let me answer the calls sometimes. And
how did it work? Tell me about it.
You just plugged it in and said, "Number please," and they'd say, "Ring Sam Jones," and you knew all the numbers on the switchboard. You didn't know it by number. And you'd plug it in and twist the thing and ring it.
Could you hear the calls?
If you wanted to, you could. You weren't supposed to, no. But you could listen in on the calls,
What about long distance calls? How'd that work?
Well, they would never let me try those, but they'd call in and tell them where, who they wanted to call. And then my mother or grandmother would have to call, I guess, Fayetteville, and place the call, and then call them back, and they answered.
Was it a big deal to use the phone, or do people do it all the time?
Oh, I think they did it quite a bit, especially on party lines.
Tell me about party lines. What was a party line, and how did that work?
Well, we lived on a 26F4, a 4-party line when I was a kid out on the farm. And you just pick up and call the operator if somebody else wasn't talking. But if somebody else was talking on the party line, you had to wait till they got through. Sometimes that could be a long time. And then you'd call, they'd be talking to somebody.
Could you listen in?
Yeah. In fact, people would call in, and somebody wanted the line, they'd say, "Would you please hang up? I want to use the telephone line." So it was, but most people were nice about it. And they were all neighbors, so, everybody knew everybody.
Did you have any funny stories about using party lines, things you heard on the phone or things that happened that you could think of?
Oh, I don't think so, no. Not that I can remember. Of course, I didn't talk on it too much. It was usually my mother and all her friends that talked on it. But I didn't use it too much growing up.
Do you remember the old trades days?
Yes, I do remember.
Tell me what you remember about them.
Well, I don't remember a lot. I don't remember ever going to a trades day. I know my mother did, because I remember the little tickets, that they put in at different places. And the drawing was in the Prairie Park. And we'd come to town every Saturday, and they'd have the Trades Day drawing, and then from each store would give away something. I don't remember my mother ever winning anything, but we usually went to the Trades Day.
Was it a big social event, or was it just a shopping thing?
No, I think it was a social, the neighbors met in town and different relatives and everything. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the old water tower when they took it down?
I remember when it fell down.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, I was working at the police department. Prairie Grove had a municipal court in the back of the police department, and which was right by the water tower. So I was working there the day it fell. It was pretty scary, but it didn't fall in our direction, thank goodness.
Weren't they trying to take it down?
I think so, as well as I remember.
Let's talk about your time working at the city. I know you're with the city for many years. Tell me when you started and what you did and how long you stayed and all that.
I started they started a municipal court, which was a city and county court, and I think it was in 1976. Bobby Moore is the one that was the first one that worked there. And then I started in 77, and I worked there until 1994 when I retired.
What did you do for them?
I was the court clerk. We processed all the misdemeanor tickets, speeding tickets, DWIs and public and talks, and then we had a civil court too. And Bob Whitlock was the judge when I first started, and he passed away, and then Robert Gladwin was the judge then. Boyce Davis, your dad, was the city attorney, and we had several prosecuting attorneys, so I'm not sure, can't remember their names.
Tell me, which judges would sentence people to stay in the old jail back behind the...
That was after our time.
Before your time, you mean?
I mean, before our time, yeah. No, we didn't use we used the jail back there for storage.
So you sent them all to Washington County to go to jail?
Yeah, they sent them to Washington County.
Do you know when they quit using that old jail?
I really don't,
One of your local attorneys, John Everett, told me a story about that the mayor one time passed an ordinance about dogs. Was that when you were working at the city where they said that you couldn't, it was against the law to let a dog run free in April?
I think so, yes, because I was living in Prairie Grove. But I'm not sure.
What funny stories or things that stand out from your times in the court? You sit through all the court proceedings, didn't you? Mm-hmm. What are some of the more funny ones you can remember?
I didn't usually have to sit through the trials, and but I sat through the arraignments. But sometimes people would get a little irate and they'd be sent to jail. And but usually it was pretty calm and not too bad.
Did you get to meet a lot of people working at the city?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Tell me about some of the people that worked for the city that you knew, maybe not in the courts, but just different ones you knew over the years working at the city.
Well, Kenny Bartholomew had the grocery store there at one time. And of course, John Everett was the attorney across the street, he and Bob Whitlock. I knew all the merchants in Prairie Grove that, you know, that had the grocery stores and the drug stores. And seems like everybody, police department, all the policemen, of course. Lee Terry was chief of police. And then
the whole time you were there, he was?
No, he left before I did. Robin Casey was police chief after that, and then Carl Dorman, I believe.
Who was the before Lee? Were you there? Was Lee there the whole time you were?
Mm-hmm, right. Mm-hmm. In fact, Carl Dorman, I think, was the last one that was there when I left.
And what year did you say that was?
I think it was in 94, 95 or something like that.